Welcome to the All About You podcast. Today, my guest is Avrum Weiss, author of the book Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. So, communication between couples can be tricky. So, with the help of Avram, I hope we can learn and understand what these fears are and how men and women can work through them to have a successful relationship. Avram, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Can I just ask initially, what brought you to writing that book about men and communication?
Sure. I'm a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and I work a lot with men. And as I was sitting and listening to men talk, mostly what I heard was a litany of their dissatisfactions in their primary relationship, in their intimate relationships. And the complaints were pretty similar from man to man. And it was clear to me as they were talking that these were self-contained complaints, that they weren't talking to their partners about these issues. And so I started asking, these things bother you a lot. Have you ever talked with your partner about this? And I routinely, almost every time, got the almost exact same response. First, they would get defensive and kind of angry that I had suggested, that they were not talking to their partner, but it was very clear quickly to me that they were afraid to talk to their partner about it, that they thought my suggesting that they talk to their partner was an absolutely bad, stupid, crazy idea. And so I started asking men, it kind of sounds like you're afraid to talk to her. And again, they would get defensive, but very quickly you could see, like really within a minute or two, you could see a look of sort of recognition come on their faces. They would sort of try the idea on and go, say something then like, that's an interesting idea. That might explain a lot. Then we would go back through a lot of the things that we had previously talked about, which started to make a lot more sense once we had the understanding that in fact they were afraid of their part.
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall at one of these conversations because I think if you ask any women about communication with their partner, they will reel off 101 different things they're not happy about. So
Yes.
I'm very intrigued what the men said. So come on then, spill the beans then, Avram.
Well, I think I want to respond first to what you just said, which is it's absolutely true because men are largely opaque to women. I would add the same is true that women are largely opaque to men. Freud famously said 150 years ago, basically said the biggest thing he never understood was the one thing I can't make any sense of is what's up with women. So it goes both ways. But if you go into a bookstore, you will find almost certainly one large section of books written for women, unfortunately, mostly by women, on trying to explain men to women. So it's a big deal, and women frequently talk about feeling like men just don't make sense to them. They don't understand men. And I think the key to that understanding, I think the reason that women often don't understand men is not understanding the ways in which women are afraid of men.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is. I mean, it actually came as a surprise to me. It's not something I knew about myself or other men, but having been taught by these other men. So I can give you a very simple everyday example that will make clear what I'm talking about. Guys at work. It's getting towards the end of the day, and one of his friends comes up to him and says, "Hey, a bunch of us going to the bar after work to watch the game. Do you want to join us?" Do you know what is likely to be the first thought that comes to that man's mind?
No, because I need to go home to the family.
Right. Yes, he's more likely to be worried about whether or not his partner will disapprove of him going out with the guys. That happens so quickly that he really often doesn't even have a chance to check in with himself to see if he might like to go. Maybe he doesn't want to go. Maybe he wants to go home, or maybe he does want to go. But the worry about getting it wrong, about displeasing his partner, kind of blots out the sun. The sad part about that is that in most cases, the woman's at home thinking, Oh my God, why? Of course you should go out with your friends. All the time I'm bugging you to go out with your friends. You don't spend any time with your friends. Why would you think I wouldn't want you to go? So it's not in response to criticism from women necessarily. It's more men's self-contained fears of misstepping, of getting it wrong, of not being approved of.
That's interesting because my logical brain would be the guy gets the offer of going to the bar. Firstly, do I want to go to the bar or do I not? First decision purely on what he's thinking. Then let me speak to my partner. Okay, honey, I've got this opportunity. Do you mind if I go and watch the game and the beer with the boys? It could be an argument between them, or it could be, no, no, that's absolutely fine. Then I can go and do something else. That would be my initial reaction to that scenario.
Well, I think that's how women think it would go for men, but that is most often mistaken. And you used an interesting phrase, which I'm going to focus on, maybe making more of it than you meant, but you said you imagine the man saying to his partner, "Is it all right with you if I go to the bar?" And that's the language that often gets used from men towards their partners, which is the language of permission. So those conversations often become hierarchical and really sound more like parent-child conversations than partner-partner conversation. And that's that same fear for men, is that happy wife, happy life. If my wife is not happy with me, I can't be happy. One of the titles I considered for the book was "I'm okay if we're okay."
I love that. If we go back then, I was thinking when he phones home, is it just to make sure I'm not supposed to be anywhere else, as in the woman generally is, looking after the social calendar for the family? Am I supposed to be home to take the kids somewhere? Am I supposed to be home to do something? That's what I was thinking.
Well,
It,
that's part of it, but I don't think that's all of it. I think probably the biggest part of it is, uh-oh, I'm going to get in trouble.
and where does that stem from, though? Is that a childhood thing?
It certainly is. You know, it occurred to me the other day, I don't know if we can do this in podcast. I don't have the video queued up, but I'll describe a video to you and tell your listeners, if you Google the still face experiment, STILL, you can watch for yourselves. And I recommend that you do because, the images are worth 1,000 words. It's much more powerful to watch it. So this was an experiment done back in, I think, the 70s, called the still face experiment by a guy by the name of Edward Tronick. And he took infants and mothers and he had them interact with each other, and he filmed it in a split screen so you could see each of their faces, right? And it's clear they're having a conversation. Even though babies can't talk, they're learning about what pleases the other one. So the baby makes a funny noise and the mom smiles, or the mom makes a certain expression and the baby laughs. And so they're learning what each other like. And for the baby, you have to understand that's a life and death conversation, because humans, unlike other mammals, humans are born completely dependent on their caregivers. They can't feed themselves, they can't walk, they can't avoid danger, they can't do anything. So for the infant, having mom's attention is life and death matter. So in the experiment, they had the experimenter turn away the mom and turn back with a still face, meaning not critical, not angry, not harsh, just unresponsive. And you have to see for yourself. But within 60 seconds, these babies completely lost it. Crying, screaming, wailing. Some of them actually lost the ability to sit upright, and some of them lost bowel and bladder control just because their mom was not responding to them for 60 seconds. Because again, it is a life and death matter for them. If mom doesn't respond to me, I will be dead within a day. Interestingly, the boy babies got more upset and stayed upset longer than the girl babies did in this experiment. Okay. Now you fast forward to adulthood. And for men who had this experience with their mothers, getting into an intimate relationship with a woman recreates that experience for them. And they feel the same sense of panic if the woman is not validating and attending and approving, they feel the same sense of panic that they did as an infant.
So basically, what you're saying then, they are looking at their female partner exactly like they did their mother. And
Exactly.
if there is no
Emotionally.
expression of love, happiness, etc.,
Yeah,
they panic.
exactly. And that's the core of what these fears are. And I'll give you an example. A guy told me once that when he came home from work every day and came in the front door, he could tell immediately whether or not his wife was upset with him. Understand, he meant before he saw her. He believed he could feel in the air. So think he's coming home from work, his mind's on work, but as he gets closer to home, what is the one preoccupying thought? Is my wife upset with me? And he's so focused on it, he believes he can feel it in the air before even seeing her. That is what's going to determine whether he's going to be okay that evening, is whether or not his wife is with him or not.
I mean, I guess that reminds me of Are You All Right, Darling? Yes, I'm fine, as I'm slamming down things on the counter, kicking the cat, etc. I'm not talking about me personally, but it's that female, yes, I'm fine, but your body language is saying, hell, you are so not fine. You are angry. It could be nothing to do with the man, but you are angry, but you're trying to say, yes, you're fine. I can understand how that is confusing.
It becomes a cycle, a self-perpetuating cycle, because your example is a great one. So why is the woman slamming things down on the counter rather than saying directly, yeah, I'm upset about something? Why does it go that way?
I've no idea.
Well, people act things out indirectly when they don't feel like they have a direct means of expressing themselves. So when you're in a one down position, when you experience yourself, so you don't go up to your boss and say, by the way, I just want to tell you, I think you're a terrible boss. I've never had a worse boss. I can't stand work. You don't have those conversations because you don't want to lose your job because you're in a one down position. So people in one down positions or who experience themselves, they try to find safe ways of expressing their dissatisfaction with something. So women are more likely to express their dissatisfaction indirectly. But of course, men who are like that man, so sensitive to disapproval, right? They're not missing the message, but it's contradictory to them because she's saying, yes, I'm okay, but he knows damn good and well she's not. So it just keeps turning the temperature up on the interaction.
I mean, there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Avram. I've read the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And I have to say, I think that book is brilliant because I understand if men have got a problem, they just want to gaze at the fire, the TV, the newspaper, the phone, whatever, and think things through slowly. Women are upset or have a problem. We want to spill. She said this. I said this. Should we have done that? He's quietly in his cave contemplating. We are just spilling everything out.
First of all, it's important to understand that those differences are not innate, they're learned. They're taught by a patriarchal culture that teaches men not to be open about their inner lives, to keep it to themselves, to be stoic, to tough it out, to not ask for help. And so it's not that men don't want to talk to other people when they're upset. It's that they don't have a lot of practice in it and they don't have a lot of good experiences doing it to make them feel like they can seek someone out to talk to. Because when I run groups, therapy groups with just men in them, they're quite open with each other. They're quite vulnerable. They talk very freely to each other. They behave like what you would stereotypically think of as women, but it's not really about gender. It's about how we're taught, about how we're raised.
So, the one thing that's ringing in my ears at the moment is men's lack of communication, shall we say, is down to their mothers. But this goes back generation, generation, generation. Is that what you're saying?
That's in part what I'm saying because it starts. You asked me earlier where it starts, and that's where it starts, but it gets reinforced throughout life by the culture. The culture reinforces. So there's a marvelous book by a psychologist named Judy Chu, who is also a US Congresswoman from California. Chu wrote a book called When Boys Become Boys. And she spent 2 years in a kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten class, hanging out every day with this group of 5 and 6 year old boys to understand when does this socialization start. So she spent the time in a Quaker school. And if you know anything about Quakers, they're very, very progressive. And they do not want their children to be stereotyped into gender social roles. So the school and the parents are doing everything they can to not have boys subjected to these gender expectations. And even in that setting, the boys developed a secret club in the class called the We Hate Girls Club. This is with everybody working against it. And there's this heartbreaking story about this little boy. At the end of the year, the teacher says everybody can lead the class in their favorite song from the year. And this little naive boy stands in front of the class and starts singing a lullaby. At which point, the other boys in the class start snickering and making faces and making fun of him. So, in that moment, he learns the lesson that men learn all their lives, which is it's not okay to appear to be tender or soft or vulnerable. Other men will mock you for that. And so he says to the class, I was just kidding. I don't like that song. And he starts to sing the Marine Corps anthem. And it captures in that one, remember, it's a little 5 year old boy. You can just hear in this story what happens to men. There's a researcher who wrote the foreword, and he spent a career studying what he called gender role conflict. Gender role conflict is the difference, the gap between who I see myself to be and who society expects me to be as a man. Society expects me to be tough, and I experience myself as tender. That's gender role conflict. So he has over 200 studies correlating, and the higher gender role conflict is correlated with things like addiction, depression, anxiety, suicide, incarceration, premature mortality. All these horrible things are, now it doesn't mean gender role conflict causes them. It's correlation, not causation. But you can see in this research the cost to men of these patriarchal expectations, because most men are not that stereotype and suffer in a culture that continually expects them to be who they're not.
How can we use that information to improve communication between male-female couples in the home?
It's sort of extraordinary how much changes immediately with women just understanding what you and I are talking about today. One of the interesting things, I'm a regular columnist for Psychology Today. I learned recently that you can look at the gender of people who read your columns. And I was quite intrigued to see that more women than men read what I write. Even though I'm writing about what we're talking about today, I'm writing mostly about men. Slightly more women than men read what I write. I think that's a very promising sign.
That to me makes sense. We want to understand.
Right. And so that is the starting place for lots of good things. Wanting to understand is a great starting place. The next step is a little less intuitive, counterintuitive, which is really most men do better if they start these conversations with other men before they try to talk to their partner about them. Because men often don't have a lot of experience in being more open and talking about their inner lives, and it's less intimidating to them to do that in a room with other men. And so the learning for me in doing this work has been how helpful it is to men to have other men to talk to as a way of learning to be more sort of emotionally fluent and comfortable talking about their feelings, and then going to their partners works better.
I'm intrigued when you've got a group of guys gone out for a beer, gone out for lunch, or whatever they're doing, that one of them will strike up a conversation about communication with their partners. I cannot see that happening before hell freezes over.
Well, I don't know if it would happen in a bar. I can tell you what happens in the groups I do all the time. I just recently was at a conference, and I organized what was called an affinity group, meaning there was a 2 hour time block, not a therapy group, just a gather. Now, it was a therapist conference, so everyone there was a therapist. That's not normal. I understand that. But it was a 2 hour meeting, no agenda, no structure, just a gathering of men, any man who wanted to come and talk about anything. And the depth of intimacy in that group, people didn't know each other. In 2 hours, the depth, the emotional depth that that group of men got to was to me stunning. And a wonderful reminder that women don't know this, but men do have that in them. They not only have the capacity, but what's important to understand is they have the same desire that women do. Men are not different from women in this way. Men need attachment the same way women do. Men are just a little more scared of it.
But it's interesting what you say at this conference. You had a group of psychology professionals together. That doesn't surprise me that you had an interest in meeting for 2 hours and men communicated. But that is not the average male partner I'm talking about.
It's closer to average. I've had the same experience in places like prisons, working with men in prison. When you put a group of men in a room together and give them permission to talk openly with each other, they're dying to. They can't wait to. They've been wanting to. They just need safety and permission.
And they wouldn't do that themselves.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's no way I could go to six, eight, 10 guys and say, okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go to this room and you just talk about whatever you want. They would just look at me blankly, and I cannot see a man organizing that little group meeting themselves. I just cannot see how that would
Well,
happen.
it's part of the book actually that I'm most pleased with, which is there's a chapter in there for men on exactly how to make that happen. And what I suggest to them is start a book group, put up a notice at the local coffee shop, men's book group meeting Sunday afternoon, because that's less threatening to men. If you say consciousness raising group or therapy group, that's going to intimidate men for good reasons, which we can go into. But my field has not been kind to men. They're not paranoid. They're reacting to a significant prejudice against men in my profession, which I'm happy to go into. But what I suggest is that they put up a notice and start a book group and use this book as the first book in the book group, which will almost certainly lead to a more personal, open kind of sharing. And most of the time, then people want to come back next month when they have that kind of connection with other guys. They really like it. And then they want to do it again.
Part of me, Avram, sees this as a challenge to organise a male book club using your book as the focus and just saying, I'm not going to be there. I've organised it. There are the books. There's the space for you all. Have a good afternoon and see
I
what
think it's a
happens.
great idea, but why don't you recruit a man to be the gatherer, to
Now,
be
that is a fantastic challenge. I accept that challenge and I
okay.
will
Let me
report
know
back.
how it goes.
I really do accept that challenge because I
Great.
said to somebody this afternoon, I'm doing a podcast. And they said, what's it about? I said, men and communication. They went, well, that's going to be quiet then, isn't it? So I like that and I accept the challenge.
You know, there's a little part of my heart that breaks when I hear that story because you have to understand that it's a self-perpetuating cycle. So stereotypically, women think about men as not able to talk. So that expectation lives in their relationships with men. They may not speak it out loud, but men feel it. They perform down to the level of expectations. You know, if you expect someone to be something, they're more likely to be it. If you don't think somebody's capable of something, they're probably never going to show that to you. And so this is what happens in heterosexual relationships. Another book I'm semi working on yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this or not because of how much crap I would get from people as a man writing a book about women. Maybe I'm old enough that I don't care about that. It's become very clear to me that a lot of those negative expectations that women have about men come from what they learned from their mother. And so I've been interviewing women on the question, what did you learn from your mother about men, both in what she said and how she behaved towards men? And the answers, some of them are very positive, But overwhelmingly, the answers are extremely negative. That what women learn growing up are a lot of really negative things about men. So then they go into an intimate relationship with men, and that's baggage comes right along with them. Then you talk to men, and what is men's number one complaint? By a huge margin, men will tell you their number one dissatisfaction in their relationships is I feel criticized. Then you talk to women about what they learn from their mother, which is critical, and you realize the men are not paranoid. They're not making this up, that women are taught a set of critical beliefs about men, which come with them into their relationships and frighten men.
So we are both, the male and the female, bringing learned history
Can't help it.
into a fresh relationship, and it
Can't
will
help
just
it.
rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Unless you do something about it, unless you do the internal work to become aware of what you're unaware of and begin, awareness is a powerful force, awareness by itself. If you go to see a nutritionist, the first thing they will do is they will ask you to write down everything you eat for a week. And writing down what you eat for a week changes what you eat dramatically. Just paying attention to your own behavior is a powerful tool to change it.
So are you saying, Avram, we need to look, the female needs to look at her behavior, the man has to look at his behavior and see, are we comfortable with our behavior? Do we feel we're good in certain areas and could, room for improvement, as a teacher would have written on your report?
Yeah, the criteria is important. And my criteria would be, is this relationship helpful behavior or is this relationship destructive behavior? So when I'm working with couples and one of them says something particularly awful to the other person, typically what I'll ask them is, please help me understand how you think that's going to help your relationship right now. And usually they'll say something like, either I wasn't thinking about it, I just was getting it off my chest, or they'll say, well, I'm not trying to help my relationship, I'm trying to hurt them. And I'll be like, well, why am I here? If you want help with your relationship, you need to think about everything you say, whether or not this is going to help or hurt. You don't have the luxury, if you want to be in an intimate relationship, of just saying whatever the hell comes to your mind with no thought about how it's going to impact the other person. That's not going to work.
So we both need to take a good hard look at ourselves. What's our body language saying? What vocabulary, what tone are we using?
And am I trying to make things better? Is what I'm saying and what I'm doing honestly an effort to make things better? And if it's not, then I need to check in with myself about what the hell am I up to?
That is interesting. I love the fact that we've established we are both acting on what we have been taught by our mothers, by our fathers, because what we have been taught we think is right, we think is gospel, and we think that is how a relationship is.
All we know.
And depending on that relationship, whether it was a good, bad relationship, and it goes back and back and back and back. So it's basically where we have come from, what we have been taught about relationships, and our own vocabulary, body language, tone, etc., taking that forward. Are we just trying to criticize in this relationship, or do we genuinely want to try and sort out what the issues are
Right. Are
and
you
get us
are
back
you
on a good foot?
to say in the 60s, are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem? And if you're part of the problem, that's fine, but don't expect things to get better. If you're not consciously working to make things better, if you're doing things that you know are going to make things worse, that's fine. You have the right to do that, but then don't expect things to get better.
So we need to have more open and honest conversations with our partners as well as ourselves. When we say something, was that said to help or hinder the situation?
Right. And it's a very simple, obviously it takes years and skill and practice to learn to be good at that, but the starting place is ridiculously simple, which is I often ask couples, when is the last time the two of you spent more than 15 minutes in a room together without something else going on to distract you. No phones, no television, no, just the two of you in a room. It could be at dinner, could be whatever. But when's the last time? And usually there's then a long pause. Is they have to think back a ways. And I'm like, what makes you think you would be able to communicate with each other if you never spend any time doing it? Like, is that just going to magically happen in the 30 seconds you allot to it? I don't think so. I think you're going to have to carve out some time. So that can be, you can go for a walk together, you can have pillow talk lying in bed together, you could have it at breakfast, any place that it fits in your life. But for God's sakes, there has to be some time where you sit together and talk to each other without other things going on. Like kids can't be around, just the two of you. And most people don't spend 10 or 15 minutes a day doing that. So the simple starting place, you devote time. Good God, most people devote more time to cleaning the dishes than they do to their relationships. So the dishes look great, but their relationship doesn't look so great. Well, if you spend more time in your relationship than the dishes would look so great, but you'd be a lot happier. So the simple starting place is just caring enough to say, okay, 30 minutes a day. We're going to spend 30 minutes a day. We're just going to go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Sex is great if we have, but if we don't, it's not about sex. Let's just spend 30 minutes in bed together. How are you? How are you doing? What's going on? How'd your day go? See, people used to do this at the dinner table. When I grew up, that's what families did. You sat around the dinner table and talked. People don't do that anymore. A lot of families don't even have dinner together. Or if they do, they got the TV on or their phones out or they're not talking to each other with predictable results. And I sound like a curmudgeon saying this. I don't mean to say, things are going to hell. I'm more saying there are some values that we've lost track of. And everyone's out there complaining about not understanding their partner. Well, put in the time.
That is such valuable information. I think that is the very, very first takeaway here because you have given us so much to think about here, Avram. Avram, where can people get in touch with you? Do you have a
You
website?
I do. You can reach me on my website, which is avrumweissphd.com, avrumweiss.com. You can sign up to my mailing list there. If you do, you'll get copies of all the articles I write for Psychology Today. You will also get a free ebook about relationships. The other thing is, if you email me and you don't hear back from me in 24 hours, I didn't get your message because I always return messages with 24 hours. So if you don't hear back in 24 hours, send it again.
Avram, this has been a brilliant conversation. Avram, thank you so much for being a guest on the All About You podcast.
You're very welcome, and I will make you another offer, which is if you get this group organized and they would like a speaker, if they're reading the book, I would be happy to join on Zoom and answer any questions they have about the book.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. Thank you very much,
You're
Avram.
very welcome.
So, thank you very much for listening to that conversation. I really enjoyed it. Please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you are listening to. And please share this podcast, especially with the men in your life. If you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com.